Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us here at Book Blather. If you're new here, I'm Dave. This is Olive. Hey, you want to tell everybody what you just did? Want to tell everybody what you just did? Olive, if you've been around, you know Olive usually has a couple treats when we film, which I keep right over here. There was some extra over here today because her sister was over here and wanted some as well. And somebody's at the door. So I had to get up for 1 second. And I come back here, and guess who's up over here on the table scooping up all of them? You left one. One she left. Anyway, we're coming off of Garb August where we read a bunch of trash, right? We read a good bunch of trash. But we also have something else to talk to you about that we read recently, which is a completely different kind of book. Not trash, the opposite of trash. And that's this, The Conspiracy to End America by Stuart Stevens. So, this is a nonfiction book, of course. And so, as the thumbnail says, rational Republican. So, Stuart Stevens, an example. Contrary to popular belief, today, just because someone is a Republican doesn't mean that they are a fan of somebody, of the person that's currently in the Oval Office of the United States, and it doesn't mean that they don't realize what an incredible danger that individual is to our democracy. There are plenty of Republicans who don't, and although it's getting hard to call yourself a Republican today because that term has become more and more defined by an allegiance to a particular individual as opposed to representing a platform of policies and initiatives. But Stuart Stevens is an example of one of those individuals. Stuart Stevens is a serious Republican insider, or at least until very recently. Stuart Stevens worked on a number, over the years, worked on many, many important Republican campaigns, including, I think, 5 presidential Republican campaigns. He worked very closely with Karl Rove. If you're in the U.S., you know who Karl Rove is, a very significant Republican voice and campaigner. And so he worked on it. It was very important in a lot of these campaigns. And so this book is his take on what has happened to the Republican Party in the era of Trump and the lead up to that. Stuart Stevens worked on all these campaigns up until 2016. He is one that saw the danger coming before the 2016 election, the first time Trump was elected, and started speaking out against it back then. This book is very interesting because this book is actually written in 2023, about a year before the 2024 election, when Donald Trump made his return to the Oval Office and was elected again. Stuart Stevens has this insider's view of what has happened to the Republican Party and and how the Republican Party has transitioned from basically a principled party in our democratic country to really just an autocratic movement, and so. He talks about, as you can see in the title here, it says 5 ways my old party is driving our democracy to autocracy. So the 5 ways that he talks about, and he talks about, these are some of the things that have significantly contributed and have enabled the Republican Party to, that in his view, it is currently no longer a major principled party with a platform. It is now basically just an authoritarian movement. And so he explains some of these things that have enabled that to happen. And so the 5 things that he goes through, and it's really interesting because he has all this insider information and specifics that he witnessed. The first one is, he talks about propagandists. And that is, we talked a little bit about this recently when we reviewed a book on fascism, but, propaganda is a key aspect of these autocrat rise to powers, these authoritarian movements like this, where you're transitioning from democracy to an autocracy. A lot of it's in the propaganda and the language that you use. And so he talks some about that, and about this sort of, the basic concept of othering certain groups of people. In our case, It's now immigrants and trans people, and creating a very us versus them mentality, so that those that feel they have been denied things or not haven't accomplished what they should have or what they deserve, they can blame the others and create this sort of us versus them mentality with very vitriolic language, to have these sort of groups to blame. That's kind of part and parcel to an autocrat's identity, and relating to those that he gives that same identity to. So he talks about that, about propagandists, and in particular, like Fox News, the a real propaganda machine for this sort of alt right wing movement that is that forms a large basis of Donald Trump's authoritarian movement. He talks about the support of the party, and so that is a key difference, right, in why some countries these authoritarian movements get blocked, and why in some countries they don't, and the democracies get converted. And that is basically what is happening in the U.S. now. The different multiple parties have not, which happens sometimes. Different parties join together to stop the sort of fascist threat that they see coming, because that takes primacy. It's of utmost importance over any policy issues. That does not happen. A lot of times it doesn't happen, and that it's not happening in the U.S. And the Republican Party has basically caved to this authoritarian movement and has enabled Donald Trump's rise and consolidation of power. And he talks a lot about that. Some chilling stuff, in there, but he talks about how shortly before the 2016 election, when Donald Trump was first elected, there was a sort of mentality that they were shocked. For those that are not in the U.S., part of what happened in 2016 was Donald Trump kind of came out of nowhere and got the Republican nomination. He won the primaries to be the Republican candidate for president because the field was too big. There was too many Republican candidates that were competing for it, and nobody would drop out until it was much too late. And it got to the point where Donald Trump then started, with not very big margins, started locking down different states, started locking down, I don't want to get too much into how the system works, but he started locking down points basically in all these different states, and as that snowballed, and he gained popularity and visibility, and people would not get out of the race until it was much too late. So then, when there was sort of like a consolidation to try to stop him, we were too far down the road, and that's how he secured the nomination the first time around. Back when that was happening, there are people that are in his administration now, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. These were leading Republican figures even back then. It is stunning when you listen to them speak now and you watch the tapes from back then. These individuals that were, principled people in the party at the time hated him. And the things that they would say about they would vote for anybody else but him, and that we could never turn the Republican Party, turn the reins over to him and let him be represented in the Republican Party. Today, those same people, lick his boots. And so the change, the just literal, saying the exact opposite things that they used to say then, it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. But so, he talks about that and about how so much of the party has just, although they used to speak very ill of him, how they've just completely capitulated, really just out of fear and out of ambition, because they're just so paranoid of losing their seats, which he has enough power now to do. And there's, he tells a number of different stories, but there's one in here that was like so chilling that it was like right before the 2016 election, the general, people were shocked that they couldn't believe he got the primary, and that he won the Republican primary and was going to be the Republican candidate. And they were all upset about it. And, Stuart Stevens was trying to, get some other prominent Republicans in some key states to run even just as an independent to try to siphon off some votes from him. And the general attitude was, oh, we shouldn't interfere. We just have to let him lose and then, get back to things during the next election, and just live with it. And Stuart Center was telling people, well, what if he wins? And everybody said he's not going to win. The general consensus in the Republican Party was that he wasn't going to win the election. And he told the story where other Republicans were sending him messages like the day before the election saying, thanks for speaking out against him and this and that. And then shockingly to everybody, he won the 2016 election. And he said, Stuart Stevens talked about how a lot of those same people the next morning messaged him and asked him if he could delete the messages that they had sent him, because now Donald Trump was in office and they were fearful of what would happen if this got out, and they didn't want these messages in writing. Pretty chilling. And so then he talks about the financiers. That's the third thing, where it's a lot of the money that goes behind this. And, there have been some very powerful, just like the powerful news outfit Fox News, there have been some powerful money people. One of the people that he talks about is Peter Thiel, who is one of these individuals that is not very well known public by most of the populace, but it's incredibly influential. Peter Thiel is somebody that has been a major founder investor in things like PayPal and more recently Palantir, and he's somebody with billions and billions of dollars. He's incredibly rich, but he's also built an incredible network. So he's at the intersection really of tech, which has a lot of influence these days, the tech outfits, finance, and hedge funds and all that, and politics. And so he exercises a lot of control, has a lot of influence on things, and so people like that, he talks a little bit about how some of these people that are financing this, somebody like Peter Thiel, who actually literally does not believe in democracy. He believes in sort of these technocracies, and letting capitalism run free without any sort of government regulation, and that people really shouldn't even be voting. That's really not. He believes more in sort of monarchy type governments. This is not interpretation. This is something that Peter Thiel has said explicitly. He does not believe that democracy and freedom can coexist. So these are the people that have heavy influences on the Republican Party at this point. He talks about legal theories. This is sort of the long game that's been played in order to try to make things done legally. So this long campaign of basically, getting, lining up specific judges in, as members of this outfit called the Federalist Society, and then getting all those judges, nominated and put on the bench, including important courts, the appellate court, even the Supreme Court, such that now what has happened with the last few installations is now we have a super majority, and our Supreme Court, our highest court, is now a 6-3 conservative supermajority, half of which have been put on the Supreme Court by Donald Trump. And so I don't want to badmouth the Supreme Court. They're relatively scholarly for the most part, but they do have very significant biases, and in particular, a very strong favoring of a strong executive, lots of executive powers of the president. So that is definitely a significant impact, and it is reaping benefits for the current administration now, because a lot of these actions that are getting blocked by lower level judges are getting reversed, and the administration is being victorious at our Supreme Court almost unanimously. It's over and over and over again. The administration keeps getting wins. So and other things, like the sort of looking at focusing on state, at the government, the legislatures at the state level within our individual states, so that we can get, they get Republican governors or Republican legislatures that can actually change some of the rules, which is like what's happening now. Now we have this battle going on where some of the states are improperly and prematurely redrawing the lines of voting districts in order to sort of capture a bunch of additional Republican seats by the time of the next election, so that Republicans will have a significant advantage. And then the last one, thing that he talks about is shock troops, which is basically, this kind of started with, he had kind of really spoken, you would refuse to condemn some of these sort of almost like paramilitary outfits that we have in the U.S., like these, the Oath Keepers and what was the other one, Olive? The Proud Boys, these sort of, very militant, private, groups, and he encouraged them. And a lot of those were some of the individuals that, when he lost the election in 2020, in between his two presidencies, when he lost the election in 2020, he stoked them and a lot of other people to have this, engage in this violent attack on our Capitol building to try to stop the certification of that election and to try to overturn the results of that election. And it was this violent mob that attacked our Capitol building and was threatening all of our national legislators. And so, a lot of those people got in trouble after he didn't get elected. And now that he's back in office, he just blanket pardoned all of them. So they're all free and back to doing the same thing they used to do. Now it's a little more dangerous. Now he's even doing it in a little more of official level with our outfit called ICE, which is Immigration and Customs Enforcement. It's basically his own government police force that now he's managed to push through legislation to get them a ton of additional money and resources. They are larger than our FBI now, and they have more money now than our than a lot of armies. Just well over $100 billion in this last thing, and they are wreaking havoc on our streets. You basically have these masked members of this police force just hitting the streets, rounding people up, and it's very, very scary. Those are sort of like 5 things that he talks about. Of course, that's not an exhaustive list of anything, but it's 5 things that he talks about that have sort of enabled this transformation of the Republican Party in order to, basically that has been enabling this evolution of our democracy into an autocracy by having this party basically become, an authoritative movement as opposed to, a principled party. And, like Stuart Stevens talks about this, how, he worked on so many campaigns for so long, and that, that the Republican Party is no longer the Republican Party of Ronald Reagan and the first Bush and the second Bush, and it's now just really a cover for this authoritarian movement. So, this was an excellent book. It's really good. I think for anybody, it's and I think it's also good to read something like this to show that there, just to remind everybody that there's still hope, even among Republicans or people that have identified as Republican in the past. Funny conversation the other day. I was walking around the bedroom the other day, and I was like railing against whatever the latest, I don't even remember, whatever the latest policy or order was from the administration. And I was like, I made a comment. My wife was there. I made a comment like, I tell you what, I'm about to become Democrat. And she says, you mean you're not already? Which she said tongue in cheek, just because she hears me constantly just being despondent about the state of the party, which is just not really the party anymore. So there's a lot of those people out there. So and this is a book that's it's a great book because it has a lot of real insight in this transformation, about this transformation in recent years from a real insider. I mean, a real Republican insider who really knows and knows all the people well. So it was good. It's just educational in that sense. It's also nice in terms of like giving a little bit of hope that influential people like this are still exist. So all right. So let us know if you've read this, or you have any other comments about any of this. I'm sure people probably do. Comments are always welcome as long as you keep them decent. But I look forward to any comments you have. So you got anything else to add on this, Olive? Anything at all? No? That's it? Okay. All right. We'll give you one, the one you left. Okay? There you go. All right. Good girl. You're probably getting full now, right? You had so many. All right. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you don't have anything substantive you want to say, you can always leave Olive a puppy emoji because she always likes those. Or maybe even American flag this time. So we'll see you again very soon. But in the meantime, take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you next time.